You might be thinking that I've forgotten my words, but I didn't. I wanted to talk to you about silence today. Sometimes I think that the best prayer is a moment of silence and an empty page in a prayer book. It was only 30 seconds of silence, but it felt so much longer. Silence can be uncomfortable, and most people don't like it. Silence is the time when you are left alone with your thoughts, memories, regrets, and insecurities. Perhaps this explains why we often fill it with background music, TV, radio, or cat videos. Jewish tradition doesn't have much silence. It is easy to demonstrate. Ask a rabbi or community leader to express their honest opinion from the bima. Afterwards, anything except for silence will come back their way. Another example of it is high holidays, the period where we are in. The season of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is called Yamim Noraim in Hebrew. It means the days of fear, or we often translate it the days of awe. It is meant to be a time of reflection, analysis, and thinking, but paradoxically, these days are filled with talking. On these days, we say prayers, sermons, organize study sessions, listen to beautiful music, but there is not much silence. On these days, we tell each other that God is a judge, and there is a book. All good people are inscribed in it for a good life. There are gates which are nearly closed, and we are told that we need to try to get in. Otherwise, it will be too late. We say that Yom Kippur is the last chance to change the harsh judgment in your favor, to be inscribed for a good life, and that you must do everything you can to get through these gates. We are told that these metaphors illustrate the main messages of Yom Kippur. The day is supposed to wake you up from the sleep of your daily routine and make you think how you can improve yourself and the world, to ask for forgiveness when you did something wrong, to feed the hungry, and to break the chains of injustice. We say that tomorrow will be too late. Now it is the time to act. On Yom Kippur, the most reflective and thoughtful day in the Jewish year, we cannot stop talking. Let's pause for a moment and explore the imagery, the metaphors of this period. 10 days ago, on Rosh Hashanah, we marked the creation of the world. Rabbis teach that Rosh Hashanah is the day when Adam and Eve were created. In other words, Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of humanity, and in a way, a birthday for all of us. So sorry for being 10 days late, but happy birthday. Today, exactly 10 days later, is Yom Kippur. From early on in Judaism, rabbis decided that on this day we fast and abstain from food and drink for 25 hours. On a philosophical level, rabbis saw fasting as an allusion and a reminder of our mortality. They say that on Yom Kippur, you rehearse the day of your death. Therefore, you confess your mistakes and transgressions and reflect on your life, as if it is your last day. There are only 10 days in between the day we remember the birth of humanity and the day we think about the end. When you put them together, it becomes clear that the 10-day period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is an opportunity to put your life into perspective. If your entire life was only 10 days long, what would you do? How would you choose to spend your time? What would you not do? Sometimes it is helpful to think beyond time, to take a step aside and see yourself from an outside perspective. High holidays, therefore, is the time you spend alone with your priorities. Test your values and try to imagine what the world would be without you. Better? Worse? Or the same? To be honest, everything that I've just said is a very, very traditional approach to Yom Kippur. In normal times, I would continue and develop these ideas more. I tried. I started to write it so many times, but I couldn't do it. Because this year was anything but normal. This year, we are anxious without imagining closing gates and the book of life. This year, we don't need a harsh judge to feel alert and awake. During the last 18 months, we already had too many thoughts about life and death. This year, we don't need a traditional Yom Kippur because every day was like Yom Kippur. It was not the first time when it happened. I think that early generations of rabbis were in a similar position to us today. They lived in the first century of the Common Era. Their generation went through the time when Roman Empire took control over the land of Israel. People rebelled against them, but without success. And that ultimately led to the destruction of the Second Temple and almost 2,000 years of exile. After these events, Jewish people lost all means of practicing their form of Judaism. Their lives changed dramatically and rapidly. They spent a lot of time making sense and reflecting on their experience and wrote down their thoughts and ideas. After a few centuries of collecting and editing their wisdom, we have two books, Mishnah and Talmud, foundational book of rabbinic version of Judaism. Reflecting on the crisis, they said that after the temple was destroyed, the gates of prayer were closed. Now we know exactly what they meant. After a sudden change, many lessons, constant feeling of uncertainty and stress, it is hard for all of us to find a peaceful moment and immerse ourselves in spiritual practices and prayers. Even reading a book became a challenge for so many of us. After a year of being frightened of the deadly disease, we have no energy and desire to say prayers with sincerity. High Holidays liturgy uses such a strong language that it becomes overwhelming. I think those early rabbis felt the same. But when their gates of prayer were closed, they didn't give up. They searched for another way to connect to their tradition, and they found it. They articulated an important formula. Every gate has closed, except for the gates of tears. The gates of tears are never closed. It takes a lot of strength to go through a year like this. It's easy to say that we need to move on and rebuild our lives, but it is much harder to do it in practice. Before you can build anything, you need to heal your wounds first. If we want to end our year of atonement, we must admit our weakness and accept our limits, to show our emotions, disclose our insecurities, and learn how to ask for help. Perhaps this year, as we re-emerge and slowly go out from our homes, we need to learn how to use the gates of tears. We need to learn how to mourn our losses, so that we can prepare ourselves to build a better world on the wounds and ruins of the one before. This Yom Kippur, let us say, Dear God, please don't be a judge for us this year. We already had enough judgment. We had too much sorrow, sadness, and pain. We are weak and fragile. We don't need a judge, we need a friend and a guide. Dear God, please don't be a sovereign for us this year. We had enough governance and obedience. We feel small and insignificant. Please don't be a sovereign. We need a loving parent. Dear God, please don't open your book this year. Please don't count us and don't make your lists. We already saw too many lists, charts and numbers that kept growing and growing. We do not need a book. We need something to lean on. All the best we have in Judaism today, our traditions, beautiful prayers, food, learning, came out of the destruction and exile. On the ruins of a catastrophe and sorrow, we found a way to live with our traumas and built a new version of Judaism, with synagogues instead of the temple and prayer instead of sacrifices. It took us a long time, but we did it. Today is our turn to rethink our lives, to heal our wounds, and to build a better world on the ruins of the one before. In the world that divides us and urges us to take sides, let us build a community of trust, inclusion, and understanding. In the world that demands cold justice, let us build a community where justice is balanced with mercy and compassion. Let us be loyal friends and guides to each other, even when we disagree. In the world that leaves the needy behind, let us open our doors and share our food and clothes with those who need it more. In the world that chooses to ignore emotions, let us begin to heal our souls and to allow ourselves to show emotions, for the gates of tears are never closed. In the world that is incomplete, let us allow ourselves to be broken and not to be afraid to ask for help. The Talmud tells a story about Rav Sheshet, who was blind and turned up among the crowds at a parade. One of the bystanders made a comment that his presence was a waste. Being blind, he wouldn't be able to tell when the emperor passed by. The rabbi insisted that he would be able to tell exactly when. As every legion approached, the crowds cheered, but he said, "Oh no, this isn't the emperor." As the crowds went quiet, Rav Sheshet said, "Now the emperor is approaching. You can tell his presence from the silence." Sometimes I think that the best prayer is a moment of silence. We recognize something important in it. There is a mystery in silence, an anticipation of something deep, intimate, and spiritual. We call it awe. Sometimes something big and important is coming, and we know that it is near. We just need to wait and listen. In a moment, we will fill the space with music and prayers. But before, let us spend a few moments in silence, like we did before in the beginning. But this time, let's look around and be with each other. Remember and honor our losses. Heal our wounds so that we can be ready to turn the ruins into the new and better world. Gmar Tov. Have a meaningful Yom Kippur.